while you're talking, I just want to see if you could also answer the question about why it's important to check your voter registration status and to be prepared when you prepare to vote.
It's critically important. We're living, unfortunately, in a day and age where, people fall off the voter, the voter rolls, right? And so you don't want to be that person where you think you're registered and you show up at the poll and you're denied access, the right to vote, right? And so it's critically important that folks, before election day, check to see if they are currently on the voter rolls and if they're registered. It's easy. It's extremely accessible. You can check online. If you just Google, am I registered? There are a number of organizations like Rock the Vote that will come up where you can check to see if you are still an eligible voter. The U.S. government also has a portal where you can check to see whether or not if you're still registered. Color of Change, a number of great groups allow you to check your voter status. The other option is you can go to your local board of elections to see if you're still registered. So I implore that everyone check to see if they are still considered a registered voter, right? As I prepped for tonight's call, I said, you know what, let me check to see if I'm a registered voter, right? So I encourage everyone to do that. It's critically important, particularly for this election.
And I'm going to stop there to see if Yvonne has anything that she wants to add before we move to the next topic.
No, I think Stacy and Kendra pretty much have covered, all the great things about mobilization. I guess I have to add one thing. I go in terms of the coalition building. It is so important to bring people from different economic status across the board because all of us have influence in different ways. And so, whereas I may be able to bring out some people to vote and listen to me, depending on your local community in which you live, it's important to build those coalitions because you're trying to get everybody out,
Yep.
everybody out, and not just people who are in your bracket or who are your neighbors. And indeed, it's the biblical thing is who is my neighbor, and so when you start to think about that, you definitely want to bring in as much of a diverse uh, coalition as you can because that will allow you to be able to reach so many more different types of people. Depending on who you're talking to, that has a lot to do with who has the most influence. So I would just like to add that as people are trying to build those coalitions, don't just look just at your own individual friends. Think about what other organizations are in your community that you can form together and band with that can help you do that.
Okay. And so, after you check your status to make sure you're registered and, you think about coalition building, another very important topic that we want to talk about is voter suppression. It might not look the same way that it might have looked in the 1950s or the 1960s, but it's something that we should be aware of. And so I'm going to turn to Kendra now to talk about some of the modern day tactics for voter suppression that we should be on the lookout for.
Sure, thank you, Lani. So voter suppression is any effort that's either legal or illegal by way of laws, administrative laws, or tactics that prevent eligible voters from either registering or actually voting, right? And so how this is playing out now, there's misinformation that is out there that, for those who are not aware, has specifically targeted Black communities. This is something that has been well documented. There have been Senate reports about it. There have been hearings, that have taken place. There are also state leaders presently across this nation who are trying to modify and limit access to early voting, even now, right? So this is still happening. In North Carolina, you had a case there where the state legislature, how they drew the maps of one party, who I shall not name, one party said on the record that they intentionally drew the maps how they did so that they could have a political advantage. They said that on the record, one of the state legislatures. members. And he said that he would have done it more if he could have, if he could have gotten away with it. And so, again, that's not a hyperbole. That's what he actually said on the record. So these are things that are happening to this day, and they're happening across our nation. And everyone has to understand it's happening because your vote is your voice. People know that your vote matters. And so you have to understand that as well. And so I think that those are some of the examples of how voter suppression is continuing to this day.
Okay. And before we move forward, I just want to remind those that are watching on YouTube that you can post questions in the chat, and we will try to monitor that in order to get the questions to our panelists and our speakers tonight.
I just want to add to what Kendra just mentioned. Listen, a perfect example is Stacey Abrams and her campaign, right? That's a clear example of voter suppression where, what was it, like an egregious amount of people were no longer on the voter rolls, right? And so, how does that happen, right? And you have to start to think, I hate to say this, reactively, right? And the way to do that is, again, by checking your registration, making sure you're on the voter rolls, putting together a plan, right? Just to ensure that some of this stuff doesn't happen.
And if I could add to that, Lani, um, uh, additionally, when Kendra spoke earlier about which we hope is bad information, that there's just one polling place in one county in the state of Texas. That is a form of voter suppression. When you put up roadblocks to make it difficult for people to cast their votes, or you, in the name of COVID, go from 150 polling places down to 5. You think about all those people, you hoping that they won't stand in line and make it such that people got to stand in line for 12 hours. That's all a part of people trying to suppress the vote. And you have to be more determined, that's the reason the whole idea is this is a season of voting. And if we don't get anything else across tonight, it is plan your vote. Plan how you're going to vote. If you're going to vote that day of, pack your bags. Know that already know what you're going to be dealing with, because those are definitely modern day suppression.
That's right.
Okay. Now, we do have one question in the chat from a viewer in Philadelphia, and their question is, will the president's lawsuit against the city, is there a possibility that it could impact their voting day there?
Well, I guess, and related to that, everything is fluid. As Kendra mentioned earlier, there are lawsuits constantly changing. So the best thing that you can do is definitely check your local, check your state, your Secretary of State's website in every state. In every state, the Secretary of the State is the state elections manager, and if you check their website, you will be able to get the most up to date for your state up until the day you go to vote. If you're still unsure about what's happening, I appreciate all the national sites, but make sure that you just check your Secretary of State's website. So I would encourage the person who asked the question the answer that is yes, it probably could, depending on how the outcome goes. But to make sure that is you just go to the Pennsylvania Secretary of State's website, and they're going to have the most up-to-date information for you. And what can happen if you've never done one of those sites, you go in, you plug in your county or your district, and it gives you that particular stuff for you. You as your voter, it'll give you down to your district and where you're supposed to vote. So it drives all the way down from the state all the way down to you as an individual when you go. And most of those national links take you to your Secretary of State's website as well.
And I want to add in something. I'll just say that there has been an overall attack, and everybody may not agree with me. There has been an overall attack on the integrity of our election process in our nation, right?
Yes.
The overall integrity. And so that is highly problematic. And I think that what that does, it undermines how folks feel about knowing that the outcome is a just outcome or is the right outcome. And I think that that is one of the saddest things that I have seen since I have been alive, right, is just the attack on the integrity, and so I will say that don't let that dissuade you. Don't let that cause you to stay at home. Don't ever think that, I'm not going to go because, my vote may not be counted, or, I heard someone say that I can try to vote twice. Please don't do that. Right. Please know that there are things turning that are trying to bring down the integrity of our entire system. And so know that your vote matters, like I said at the beginning, and know that attacks would not come if it didn't matter. So I just had to kind of add that.
And I have one recommendation for those that are on the line listening to us today. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, they are actively monitoring any voter suppression throughout the country. And they have key attorneys on the ground in key states. So if there are issues that are a little alarming to you or you have questions, I encourage folks to contact the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And, they are pretty responsive. And, I wouldn't let voter suppression deter you from voting. I would just say be mindful and watchful about what's going on around you.
So let's get to a few real life examples. For the
Okay.
folks that are planning to actually stand in line and vote in person on election day, let's help them put together a plan for that, because we know that's going to take a certain amount of resilience and strength.
Yes.
So let's first answer the question about what happens if they get to the polling place and they find out that day that their name has been purged from the roll. What should they do?
I can take that one.
Okay,
I guess
Yvonne?
I want again to stress what Stacy said earlier. The way, first of all, we want to definitely encourage them to check for we even get there. But we get there that day, they can cast what's called a provisional ballot. They can say, yes, I am a registered voter. And so they can challenge. Don't go home mad saying that the people told me I wasn't supposed to vote. If you're in a state like Alabama, you got to have ID, have your ID, have all those things that they're telling you. That's a form of voter suppression as well, having you to have all these different type of IDs. So already know the ID that you need to go and vote, okay? When you go vote and they tell you, we're sorry, your name is not on our list. You know that you've been voting at this polling place for the last 15 years and nothing has changed. You can do what's called a challenge ballot or a provisional ballot. What that would do is you insist that you have a right to vote, and the poll worker should afford you with what they call a provisional ballot. That ballot allows you to vote, and what they would do is after the polls close, when they get ready to count all those votes, they're then going to check and see were you correct, were you supposed to vote. And if your name was valid and you were a registered voter, but somehow your name got left off the list or what happened, then there's a day when you go in and you take your ID and they count your vote. Okay? So you can vote that day. Don't go home. The thing is you want to do what they call a provisional ballot or a challenge ballot. And that's pretty much nationwide. You can cast that ballot. It won't be counted that in the day, but after all the ballots are counted and they get ready to go check. A lot of times you have, going back to what Kendra mentioned earlier, not Kendra, Stacy mentioned about the double voting and whether or not people something the president was saying about voting absentee and then going to the polls and voting again. That is illegal. That is illegal. But if you did that, let's say you did cast your absentee ballot and you didn't put it in the mail until that day before, you're not sure if it got there. You could go to the polls that next day because your name, it may not show up. Most of the time, once you cast your absentee ballot, it's going to show up that you cast an absentee ballot already or you've already voted. If you're doing early voting, your name is going to have voted by on the day of the election, okay? So, but if some reason you want to challenge that, then you can do the same thing. It's called a provisional ballot or a challenge ballot.
Okay. And there's a question in the chat about whether when we go to the polls on the day of, or, even if there's early voting, should we have any concern about the poll workers or the poll watchers?
Well, there are two different things. There are poll workers and then there's poll watchers. Let's get those corrected. The poll worker is the person there who is actually could be a volunteer like me. I volunteered this year to be a poll worker. So I've got to go to a training, and they're actually, every state is looking for poll workers that look like us. So if you can take off and you have leave at your job, most jobs will let you take off to be a poll worker. In fact, the NAACP and many other organizations are looking for lawyers and other professional people to be poll workers, meaning you go get the training, you're there on site, and a poll worker can help put down some of this voter suppression. If you're there, you're able to assist with calming some of those things. The poll watcher, on the other hand, is actually the person who is a volunteer. The poll worker might get some type of stipend, okay, from the state or the local government for working that day. Okay, and they're the ones who take your ballot, help you with your ballot, and doing those things. The poll watcher is sitting there watching on behalf of a candidate or a party or a political party. And those people they are not supposed to say anything to you. They can just sit there. Every candidate, pretty much, I know in Alabama, I don't know about other places, but in Alabama, every candidate on the ballot has a right to have a poll watcher inside the poll, okay? And every political party has a right to have a poll watcher in every polling station, okay? But that's two different things. But the watcher is just there. They should be sitting over to the corner. They're probably watching. They should not be doing anything intimidating, anything that should be happening. And if that is happening to you inside of the polling place, that is when you go tell the poll worker what is happening. And then they can assist from that point.
Okay. Do you want to add something, Stacy, to that point?
To that point, to Yvonne's point, in New York State, I know we also encourage attorneys to volunteer their time as poll workers. Generally, and I, like Yvonne, I also volunteered as a poll worker during a couple of elections, and there are generally one or two attorneys on site. So if you feel that your vote is being suppressed, identify a poll worker, and more than likely one or two of those poll workers on site are also attorneys. And again, I reiterate, call the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. There's normally someone on site. And then in New York State, the Board of Elections, we have a committee of attorneys that are available to answer calls from 5 a.m. in the morning till 9 p.m. at night. So there are a team of attorneys that are really on top of voter suppression, particularly during this election year.
And Lena, also let me add, there's also, in addition to the NAACP, there's a national called Election Protection Hotline that you can report anything to.
That's right.
And it's just that 866-OUR-VOTE, OURVOTE, is the National Election Hotline. You can also call your Secretary of State's office. Worst case scenario, I know that as African Americans, we're reluctant to call the police, but if there's major intimidation going on, indeed, you want to alert the poll workers because they can call 911 to get police out there. I think that was something recently happening. Was it in Pennsylvania just the other day during early voting? There was some voter intimidation going on as the people were going in to try to vote, and they reported it to the poll worker, and they called the police, and those people had to leave because that's illegal. That is illegal. I think that's what we need to understand is voter intimidation is illegal. We need to understand that as we are arming ourselves to go to the polls, is being knowledgeable, not just knowing that who I'm going to go vote for, but also know your rights. That you have a right not to be intimidated. You have a right to report these things and not just let it happen.
And one other suggestion, Yvonne, if you feel as though you are being intimidated, you need to document the facts, right? So try to identify the individual that's doing the intimidation, right? The time, the date, the location, as much detail as possible is helpful.
Yes, and definitely make a report. Make
Right.
a report. You know, do not leave. Like I said, they are there. The poll workers are there to assist you. They're there to assist you, and they're not helping you. Go through those other steps we just talked about. Make a phone call to the Secretary of State's office. You can call the Alabama Attorney General. I mean, not Alabama, but call your state Attorney General's office. All of them, you're going to have hotlines popping up everywhere.
Everywhere.
So when you go to the polls that day, write the hotline number down for you, so you'll have it ready, and you won't have to be worried about trying to find it. Write it down, take it with you, right along with your ID.
Save it in your cell phone. That's what I'm
Save it
hearing.
in your cell
Have it
phone.
saved
Save it in your cell phone.
And you
That's
could
right.
have the Lawyers Committee, you could have the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, you
Anybody.
can have a
Absolutely.
plethora of numbers if you don't get
Absolutely.
anyone at first call, and you could have a backup so that you can
Absolutely.
definitely try to get someone on the phone
Yes.
Absolutely. Attorneys will drop out of the air
to come and assist you, right?
to come and assist you.
Yeah,
That's right.
and you know, it's amazing this year. So many places. I was surprised, even in Alabama, at issues that we have here. But there's been a big push by our state bar, statewide, to get attorneys to be poll workers, to volunteer, to be on site to assist wherever. And I did a 2-hour CLE yesterday on election laws in Alabama. You know, just so you know what's going on, if you're going to assist, and how to how to help.
And how to help. I need to sign up, Yvonne. I'll do that tomorrow.
Yes.
So, we talked a little bit about the benefits of being a poll worker, and that's the person inside that has taken the training offered by the board and that they are there to assist you. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Is that something is it too late to sign up for that? Do you think there are areas where people could still be helpful and useful?
Yes, I would say yes. I would again go to your state Secretary of State's website. Many of them have not even started the trainings yet. They do, so it's not too late to sign up. What you generally, depending on what state you're in, you do have to, of course, be a registered voter, or definitely live within the district that you're trying to be a poll worker in most states. But every state has different requirements. And most of the time, the application is online. It was online for me. I just filled it out, sent it to the people who it said to send to. I got an email. I don't know those people from whatever, but I got an email back and said, yes, we will accept you. Let us know if you're available for the training on October 22nd. You know, so they are in need of people, because most of the people, you think about it, when you've gone to vote, most of the people are older people. With COVID, they have so many more people. Now, let me go back to about voter suppression. We talk about them closing down polling places. If you don't have enough workers, you got to have enough people to help run the machines.
That's right.
And that's why all these in the NBA, National Bar Association, NAACP, all these people are trying to get people to be poll workers.
Yeah.
So that they will have no excuse to say that we don't have enough people to work. You have so many people that are older in the with COVID, just are simply not going to work this year. They're not going to work. So if you don't have enough poll workers, if you needed 10 people to run a polling station, and you only have 5, then you're going to have to close that polling station.
You'll have to close it. Yeah.
So that's kind of what's happening. So we want to continue to have our number of polling places that we're used to. We need to get off the sidelines, get in there. You know, I would admit that I've been a person sitting on the sidelines, in and out. This year I said I'm all in. You know,
Well, Yvonne, to that point,
off work and I'm gone. You know,
I just want to say to that point, that's the type of thing that you don't want to wake up on the day after the election and say, what more could I have done? You don't want to have that feeling. If you feel that you have even a slight passion or a slight urge to help, then find a way to get involved.
And it's so simple. I mean, everybody at the polling place doesn't have to be an attorney. You have people, all they're doing is checking an ID, you know, handing out a ballot. All those people play an integral part in you casting your vote. But if you don't have enough people in the process to have a polling place open for 12 hours, how many hours it got to be open, then you're gonna have less polling places.
Yeah.
You're gonna feel like your vote is being suppressed.
Yep.
You know, some of it might be intentional, some of it might be incidental, because we didn't step up and do our part to make sure that we could help.
And I know in New York, a poll worker actually gets paid. I'm not
Yeah,
sure in
Alabama
other
gets
states.
paid too.
Yeah.
Alabama gets paid for that day.
Right.
So there's a
So-
question in the chat, and I wanted to bring Kendra in on this discussion to help us answer it. The question is, what can those that can't vote for, you know, a number of reasons, whether it be citizenship, you know, they are a felon or what have you, what can they do to be involved in this moment? How can they mobilize?
Yes, that's an awesome question. I think that what they can do is ensure that those that they know um, uh, really understand the voting process and really know who it is that they're voting for, knowing what the ballot looks like, right? Those are going to be online, so you're going to be able to see what the ballot is going to look like. And just having those conversations with those who are in your network, I call it being vote ready, right? So just ensuring that everyone that you know is vote ready and understands the conversations and things happening within your community. There are so many roundtable discussions. There's so many events such as this, you know, where we're talking about what it means to have a plan to vote, to really understand that it is a season of voting and not just, you know, one day. And so I think that for those in those categories, those are some of the ways that they can still be a part, you know, of this process. We all live under the laws that are set forward by those who are elected to office, right? So we all have a part to play.
There used to be a time we used to talk about driving people to the polls, souls to the polls, and things of that nature,
That's
or
right.
checking on
That's
your
right.
auntie or your grandmother
Yep.
or your
That's right.
grandfather, and made
That's
sure
right.
that they had a plan. So
Yeah.
I definitely think there's some work for everyone here.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Let me also add what some of the people are doing in terms of when you talk about get out the vote. One of the local organizations in this area, they're asking people to adopt a polling station. In other words, that you know you would check on that polling station that day as an organization. You adopt the polling station. You make sure people need water. You know that they need what they need to stay in line. You know, to vote. Once they get there, let's say there's a long line. One, you know, you don't want people to leave. They need water. You may have a chair. You know, you just kind of checking the polling station to see if people need anything they need to help them that day, so they don't get out of line, so that they're willing to stand there and vote.